Why, hello there, Tiny. Are you ready for your lesson today? I'm going to be reading to you Bowling Brawl by Hymne. What was that, Tiny? You want to sit in my lap and listen to me read to you? Okay, come here. The long and costly war, known as the Bowling Brawl, had drawn to a bloody stalemate. Each rival faction had withdrawn into its strongholds, secret havens, or gathered in small pockets hunkering and hiding, biding their time. There were skirmishes sporadically, but by and large the din of battle had fallen silent. It wasn't an armistice and had not a period of peace per se. The law was the simple acknowledgement that the alternative was mutually assured destruction. That fighting would eventually resume was a foregone conclusion, and so the contestants stockpiled soldiers, weapons, and vehicles in readiness for the second bowling brawl that was inevitable. The arms race was clandestine to mask their true numbers and new technologies. The build-up was vitally necessary as humans came to the realization that no treaty or negotiation was possible. There was no common ground or compromise to come to an agreement upon. It wasn't an arms race to prevent a war, but in preparation for Armageddon. Every faction milked the relative peace for all it was worth and avoided unnecessary combat. Nature also enjoyed the respite. Bluth was a planet of rich biological diversity. Both native and introduced species flourished. Since fighting was a less frequent occurrence and human inhabitants generally lived indoors, the land had no white noise of machinery to disturb the animals. The alien menace of pinheads occasionally devoured native species, though they preferred their chemosynthetic nutrients to physically eating. Terrestrial organisms were not to their liking and were in fact poisonous to pinheads. Still, the species of flora and fauna from both worlds did what the biological organisms did best. They adapted and survived. Their voices, trills, howls, and growls, filled the air. Night insects both, those were that of earth, such as crickets and cicadas, as those such as night screamers and reavers were endemic to Bluth, chirped and chittered in the silvery saw grass and other native flora, interspersed with clover and dandelions of old earth. Frogs that were earthlings and Bluthian alike croaked in coppery bends of the Holzenberg River. The black backs of catfish rose to the surface of the slow-flowing river with its mighty current. These and other nocturnal species of fish glistened in the moonlight as they hunted, hoping for a frog to jump into the water that was too deep or for a minnow to stray too far from shore for an easy meal, while aquatic snakes hunted the shoreline. Otters played, frolicking at the water's edge when they weren't diving into the water to snatch a fish. The occasional splash of predator and prey, hard at work hunting or evading, was audible. A cool, tranquil night when blue clouds of pollen across the rippling water and rustled the branches of deciduous blue-trunked coal trees and coniferous aquamarine-trunked berardi trees, which still stood as redwoods and as thick as sequoias. Two-headed owls perched in the branches kept a sharp eye out for rodents and other small prey, while cyclops bats used their sonar to dart among the tree trunks to snatch unwary bugs. Flying insects were in no short supply. Mosquitoes, for their parasitism, formed a nice space to the food chain. Wildlife was prospering during the lull after many species faced extinction. Only a few centuries before, due to the fighting, it was apparent that the animal kingdom had reclaimed the landscape on the clear, warm night of the unending summer of Bluth, which moved in a circular rather than an elliptical orbit as it swung around the orange star Adamek. Bluth rotated once every 27 days, and while Adamek was cooking the hemisphere, enjoying the perpetual day, the two moons were visible overhead, traversing the dark sky of the night. They revolved Bluth in opposite directions. The closer and smaller of the two was a pale blue moon dubbed H. Smith. Bowlers frequently found themselves standing alone against their adversaries, while the satellite passed overhead. Often, they were without a love of their own as battle came upon them, while the blue moon gazed down impassively at them. This moon traveled across the night sky on an east-west trajectory. It took 10 days to orbit Bluth. The second moon, D. Smith, was substantially larger, but in a higher orbit, and it took 45 days to complete its wide elliptical circuit of Bluth. Far from the uniform color of other satellite, it was a patchwork of greens. At Fred's Alley, the stronghold of the free world, both bowlers and marines paused on the gutter guard walls to watch the D. Smith slowly rising above the rounded tops of the Bowling Green Mountains through the shimmering shields. Bowling alleys was the pinnacles of human civilization. Fred's was the Golden City, a facility that eclipsed its rivals. It was the capital city of the League of Allied Bowlers and the crown jewel of human civilization. Through its most advanced bowling technology, the human race had ever known was passed to League members, and that had been the key to human survival. Were it not for the constant threat of an impending second war, it would be the golden age for bowlers. While major cities lie decaying in ruin pristine alleys, led by Fred's preserved society and freedom, Fred had built his alley during the darkest days of the war as cataclysmic battles razed skyscrapers in the downtowns of metropolitan centers to the ground. It started as little more than a survival shelter in the beginning of when Fred hid refugees in the labyrinth of caverns beneath the mountain range. Now it stood 2,200 feet above the ground, extended 3,000 feet below ground, and spanned on the surface and subterranean chambers for miles, covering mountainside and mountaintops. The bright neon lights of the central tower blazed and flashed fearlessly. Each letter of Fred's Alley's name winked out to repeat the sequence in open defiance of their enemies. Fred's was a beacon of hope, where the wandering refugee could eat their fill in chili cheese fries or onion rings in peace and safety for homeless refuge. Residents slept safely in lavish living quarters, and in the smell of bowling alley was sustained here by the design for comfort. Recreational bowling helped hone the skills of youngsters and adults alike who might one day take up their ball in defense of their home. You look like you're getting sleepy, Tiny. Is this story just so relaxing? Enjoying your time in my lap? It's okay. We can finish after your nap. Good night, dear. Here, let me cover you up.